Hello YouTubers, welcome back to SpanishforGringos. I'm Mark. Today we're going to learn the two versions of to be in Spanish. In English we have only one verb, obviously, to be, I am. In Spanish to be is broken into two parts. We have on one side we have estar, and it's a temporary to be. It's a temporary situation. It's referring to something that's very temporal. And then we have ser on the right, which is permanent, and it's something that's a physical characteristic of something. So Spanish is broken down into something that could be a temporary situation, like a location that you happen to be in, would fall under estar, and a physical characteristic about somebody or about an attribute about something would come into ser. So I'm just going to run through this real quick. This is a very complicated concept for people to learn because it's almost infinite, the variations of this. I could go on YouTube, I can give you 30 versions of to be, depending on, you got words that are very complicated, like subjunctive, a permanent, future, preterite, and all these big fancy words that I'm not going to get into because I'm sure at least half, or maybe less than half people don't even understand what those words mean. So I'm going to break things down in layman's terms, very simple, of how you can use these things. And we're going to get started right now. I'm going to try to move slow. The way I'm going to approach these two verbs, it's just going to be like a little kiss. I'm going to give you a little taste of this verb, and then a later lesson we're going to come back, and trust me, things will start to move and it will start to make sense. But right now, this is going to be a lot to hit at you, so I'm just going to get into it. Okay, so we're going to start with the permanent side. We'll deal with the left side of the board here. Ser is to be. And I will give you a demonstration of how to conjugate this verb into the different forms of I, me, you, they, all that stuff. Now, I just want to mention one quick note. You're going to see under this, you formal, usted. I just put that there for reference, just to say, hey guys, there's something more that goes with he or she, but we're not going to talk about it right now because it's a little bit of a difficult concept that I want to introduce, formal ways of speaking. I know in French, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have tu and vous, and vous is the more formal way of saying, well, the same thing exists in Spanish, except they do it to an nth degree. And it gets very complicated. And there's also another one that I'm not going to put down here. It's called vosotros, and it's a verb that's only used in Spain, but outside of Spain it's not used, so I'm not going to teach it. So I just want to make a little disclaimer. I don't want any negative comments saying, hey, you forgot about usted and you forgot about vosotros. If I were to tell you that there's another verb that will be attached to every single word that you will say in Spanish, you probably won't want to do any more of this lesson. But in Spain, they have another version of this verb that conjugates in the formal tense. Not going to get into it. If you're interested in learning, if you only want to go to Spain and speak the way that they speak in Spain, then maybe you should choose a different format or program. I'm going to get into the Spanish, that's practical Spanish, that's spoken and understood all over the world, outside of Spain, in 50 different countries. Well, maybe 40. I don't know how many, but a lot. So we'll get right into it. Okay, so I, in Spanish, is yo. I can say, any characteristic about myself, speaking in the first person, yo. You would be tú. So if I'm saying you directly, and we'll get into this word more after because you can also be more than just this. It can be actually 4 different things. But we're just going to, for this demonstration, we're going to talk about it in its most simplest form. If you're directing something, it's you. So you in Spanish is tú. He or she in Spanish is pretty shit simple. Él and ella. Reference back to the pronunciation of the alphabet is double L. I'm pronouncing it as a Y. It's ella. Apologize for the sound. Air conditioner just kicked in. I'll just raise my voice a little bit more. So, he or she is él or ella. We, in this form of ser, is nosotros, if you're talking about we. And then finally, at the very bottom, we have they, which is conjugated into ellos. Now, there is an exception. If you're just talking about a group, if you're saying they, but you're referring to just a group of girls, then this would change to ellas. Okay? Just want to put that little difference in here. But if it's a group of just men, or if it's a group of mix of men and women, it'll always defer back to the masculine or neutral form of ellos. So it could be 5 women and 1 man, it's ellos, because there's that guy in there. But if you're just talking about they in general, and it's unknown what the group consists of, if it's all men or if it's a mix, you always go with ellos. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you how you would conjugate you, me, he, she, and we, and them. Okay, so if I'm to conjugate, for example, to be, now how would you conjugate to be for me? In English it would be I am, right? So it's a permanent state. I could say I am tall, I am a doctor. If I'm a doctor, it would apply. You would say I am. So this is exactly how to say I am in Spanish. It's soy. So soy, I am, is of the verb to be. Something is to be, it is. Therefore I am. So if you were to say you are, like you are Canadian or you are an American or you are tall, and you're talking directly to somebody, you could say tú eres, or in Spanish is a shortcut. And I will just mention this very briefly and we'll get back to it. You don't have to say tú in the sentence. You can just say eres, because eres is only conjugated for the other person. I'll call it the second person. I'm the first person, the person I'm talking to is the second person. So you can formally say tú eres, or you can shorthand it, which is done a lot in Spanish. You can just say eres. You can say eres guapo, you're handsome. Or you can say tú eres guapo. So now we're going to get into we, which is nosotros. It's very straightforward. It doesn't need much of an explanation. We'll get back into conjugating things as we, because this will change depending on whether or not we're talking about something that's permanent, something that's past, something that's future, something that's subjective. It will change. But this is just we in general, it's nosotros. And they is ellos. Ellos son. You could say they're great or they're nice. You can say ellos son buenos or ellos son geniales, which is basically just you're saying they're great, they're good, depending on what you're saying. But ellos son. Okay, so they are, which is a form of to be. I am, they are, he is, she is. So I'm just going to give a few more examples of these in a more permanent sense, so you can tell when to use it. If you're saying, oh, is that a picture of your son? And they say, oh yeah, you can say, well, he's very tall. You can say, él es muy alto. He is very tall. Now, because that's a physical characteristic of this guy, you're going to conjugate it as ser. He is tall. You can say the same thing about a building. El edificio es alta, or alto, alto, because it's a masculine term. So I get confused sometimes too. When you're talking about Spanish, you have to conjugate not only the verb, but also the noun or the subject that goes with it. If it's masculine and feminine, it has to change over. If you're talking about something that's a male or a masculine gender, then you actually, if you're saying something that's an adjective about it that happens to be gender specific, it has to match. We'll get more into that later. We're gonna move over very quickly to this side, and we'll give some examples of how to conjugate these after I explain it. Again, I is yo. Estoy is a temporary version of I am. Again, I can say I am in Canada because I'm visiting my family. I can say estoy en Canada because that's where I happen to be. But in Spanish, that's not, you won't always be in Canada. It's a temporary state. I mean, at some point in time you'll leave, or maybe you'll stay in there, you know, forever, but it's unknown. The location is always, when you talk about location, it's always estoy because it's a transient state. So therefore, you wouldn't say, you know, you wouldn't say soy in Canada because maybe tomorrow you can go to the United States. You could say, I could say soy canadiense because I am a Canadian, and even though I live in Peru, I'm still a Canadian. So I can say I can say soy canadiense y viviendo en Peru. Estoy en Peru. So I'm a Canadian, I'm living in Peru, I am in Peru. So that's the difference between a temporary state of being and a permanent state. So it continues on with tú estás. You know, where are you? ¿Dónde estás? Which means, where are you? I don't know where they are, and it's not they're going to be in a fixed location forever. So again, it comes down to location and temporary. So instead of saying tú eres, you can say eres hermosa, you're gorgeous. That's something that you physically believe about them, that they're beautiful. It's not going to change. But if they're at the bar, if they're at the doctor's, it's going to change from time to time. So the temporary version of that would be estás. He, she, él, ella, está. Again, it's going to follow the same principle, the same example. It's a temporary state, you know. Maybe they're saying, you know, they're being not nice, or they're not being friendly. Well, if you were to say she is a good person, you could say ella es una buena persona, because you're saying that's a good person. But if you could say you're being rude, well, now all of a sudden that's a temporary state. So you would use the conjugate this version of to be's because it's a state of emotion. You're being angry, you're being whatever. So nosotros, the version, and it's very similar to nosotros somos y estamos. Estamos is like estamos emborrachos. Yes, that's good. Borrachos, sorry. So I basically just said, okay, we're being drunk. So in that case, you're going to be sober in the morning. So, you know, you would say estamos borrachos. You know, we're being drunk idiots right now. So that would be the temporary state. Now, if we're to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you and your friends are constantly a bunch of assholes, you can say somos pendejos. We're assholes, because you're making a general statement about you and your group of friends that you're not nice people. So in that case, it will move over to somos. Okay, and then finally, ellos están. Okay, again, a few seconds to look at the board, and maybe you can do a close-up on the board. So I'll just leave it at that. We'll get back to it, and trust me, I'm going to break it down real simple for you guys. Peace out.